So let's get started. I'm sorry, I need to throw a pen at someone who's annoying me right now. Okay, so the boss fight challenge was kind of a way to invite you guys to get a little bit more active with your illustrations. You have not submitted yet, Antares. Okay, so you can also relax, Tom. So what I really wanted to see was some of the more kind of high energy framing that we see in movies and action scenes. That plus really taking advantage of your foreground, middle ground, background, depth relationship. So that was definitely a criteria. I mean, there is no kind of like, it's just make the mistake and that's how you learn. I do wish that I could show you guys with extensive editing how much you could improve the illustrations, but hopefully with some editing I can kind of affect some of these, because we don't have that many submissions compared to the other challenge we did. So the core of this challenge is to use all the depths, use all the distance levels, so that's something I'm going to be referencing a lot and talking about a lot. Scale is another massive one we explored with the Conversation with a Dragon theme. That one was really just, I covered everything that I would probably wanted to have seen here in that one as well. So low camera, larger than life, kind of like scale, really helping move the narrative along if it's meant to be like David and Goliath kind of situation, which this is. I love what you're doing here. I love the colors. I love the ghoulish green. I love seeing that. The framing could be improved. The framing feels very tapestry-like. So it feels very, very flat. So that tapestry type style drawing, it's not really, so let me find a good example for it. Okay, my computer just went ballistic. So Japanese tapestry war. Okay, so this here shows a good image of it. This actually has some depth, but you can't really tell who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, who's failing, who's succeeding, who's being mourned, it's not cinematic. It's very flat. It's very storybook. It's supposed to be just a simple illustration of some stuff happening. It's not utilizing any kind of depth. It's a style. It's a beautiful style, but it's not what we use when we're trying to depict large scenes full of space, cinematic scenes. Obviously the camera changed everything, and when we think about like the Dutch angle, this is very, very active scene. It's a very high energy scene. The cameraman himself is falling as part of the action. And that's what we like to see when there's a little bit more instability. We're used to the camera being so stable. We're used to everything being so safe, and we're used to that omnipotent kind of distance from the story. Which is what we see here. We are separate from this. This is a separate universe. It's a separate window. But when we look at angles like this, we really feel like we're just being dragged right into the screen. We feel like we're part of this active, unstable environment, that we are not walking straight perfectly, but we are also leaning a little bit, unstable, ungrounded. And that's what I kind of wanted to feel in this. It's this massive swarm as I describe it. If you haven't read the description, I don't have time to read it, but it's on the community wall. The description is there for you guys, so if you want to have a read of this and what was intended. But there was supposed to be a dark swarm. Our hero is supposed to be climbing up against a cliff to the kind of like the mother insect, not the mother, just like the main insect of the swarm. And the evil sorceress is lurking in the distance, and the pet, of course, is the main creature you're fighting. This is a boss fight, final fight, kind of like a pre-game poster, right, as the boss fight loads, or maybe it could be the main game poster. It's just supposed to be high energy. And when I'm looking at a flat tapestry type image like this, though you can have high energy when we're talking about the gesture. So the gestures seem high energy. The clothing, kind of like getting caught in the wind, is high energy. The gesture, the expression, That's all high energy, but and this is all wonderful if attached to some really, really low angle camera, like the person who is witnessing all of this has fallen to the ground. They're not as strong as the hero who steps forth to defeat the creature. Usually we want to see stuff where the hero doesn't know the camera is there. So that's another wonderful way to frame your images. The hero should not know the camera is there. Another thing about this submission is that the gesture feels a little bit comical. It kind of feels like Bender from Futurama holding a sword. The silhouette feels very childlike. The head feels very large. So it doesn't really feel like someone who is capable of defeating this. Feels like an NPC about to fight the creature, the kind of NPCs that we see when Shrek goes into the castle and finds a bunch of dead knights. And like their feet are gone and stuff like that, or they're just bones and ashes of dead knights who tried to save the princess. I don't really feel like I can relate to this character. I don't feel like I have any reason to root for him. I feel like he's just going to get killed. So avoid the tapestry-like flatness. And what I want to see mostly is the exploration of different angles. And so I'm going to try to find your submission here and try to see if you did explore some angles with your submissions. So not a lot of camera work. I mean, this one was wonderful. The object that the character is kind of like coming towards the guy in the front, and he's very, very large. The camera can't fit all of him in, and he's nice and big, whereas here he's small, but he's lower than the camera. So it just feels like bad framing. Also, it's really weird framing over here. Just almost at the end of each object, the camera cuts off. So this, like I said before, the rule to some of these is that you guys are allowed to shamelessly copy cinematic framing. So write that back. You are allowed to shamelessly copy them. You could have taken this exact scene and copied it. No one out there has patents or copyrights on camera angles. If they do, that's ridiculous, and I'll probably laugh my ass off just hearing about it. But you had everything in order. Everything looked wonderful. I really like this one where the heads were kind of swirling around. That looked really, really cool. I really, really like this one here. But you kind of changed it to be a little bit more, you know, stuff side by side, looking more like a tapestry. So this one felt way more active. I really liked how the heads were kind of just forcing into the camera, circling around him like a hydra, and he's kind of like smaller, kind of afraid, but keeping his ground. So this guy here, this gesture is wonderful because it feels like he's afraid, ready to run back, but at the same time it could also be interpreted as him keeping his ground. So really, really good blueprinting, great work. This is a concept art. Remember, this is a concept design. If at any point in a movie you see a creature larger than life, all the effort put into it, framed like this, it's just really bad framing. So in Pirates of the Caribbean, when you see the Flying Dutchman surface for the first time, you see it from a low angle. A lot of the times when they're trying to represent the Flying Dutchman's boat, the Flying Dutchman, the Davy Jones boat, the one that's covered in fish and barnacles, and everyone is like half fish, half human, kind of taken over by the sea. It's always larger than life. The camera's always low. The water's always falling towards the camera. The camera even gets a little wet. There's droplets all over the camera. You really feel like you're involved. So this study, this whole challenge was meant to get you guys to be a little bit more like directors, thinking like cameramen. How do I position this camera so that it feels like the viewer is not omnipotent, distant, part of who's witnessing the story. It's not a stage. It's not just a simple stage and there's an audience in front of the stage and we have cut out backgrounds that are like waves that are moving because some guy in the back is just moving the cardboard around. It doesn't feel cut and paste. It doesn't feel like clip art. You actually have to make sure the character feels like they are also a part of this. They are also that you know, part of the on ground. They're on the field with the characters as what is happening is happening. So even though the camera angle is pretty level here, and there's a little bit more ground than sky, which is okay. It's nearly balanced. It still looks like a very, very dynamic scene, at least in comparison to this. Compare it to something where the Flying Dutchman is is, I keep spelling duck instead of Dutch. So, Pirates of the Caribbean. So I don't know where this is some amazing stuff. If you haven't watched it, you gotta go catch it. But I'm just trying to find one of those angles where the Dutchman is just surfacing out of the water for the first time. I think it's this, but it's just a beautiful low angle, so dynamic. It's so involved. You feel like a tiny little boat beside it. So this is again another instance where you can really just shamelessly steal this this perspective and apply it to your own work. So moving on, this I really like. I'm not sure what's going on because your rules of depth are really just messed around a little bit right now. So you don't really have a presence of the foreground against the background. So the background has that beautiful ghoulish green that I describe, and what I want to see is a little bit more brightness for the background, just like that. And then I'm going to duplicate the layer and darken. And I'm only doing that because I will be lassoing. Just to show you that objects in the foreground require some level of darkness to them, or else it really doesn't, it just feels like a big muck, and it feels like everything is just floating in space. And I'm sure you got that feeling too, that there is, you know, everything's just hazy. And that haziness is just the lack of depth. You don't really have any value separation between middle ground and foreground and background, which is another criteria, utilizing all of those. So when you have a darkened foreground, you kind of have a little bit more of the character present, and then the lightened background will help as well. So I'm just trying to make it so that the character feels a little bit more recognizable. As for, so this is one way to do it. As for the creature, I mean, all I'm seeing is the belly of the creature, but I'd love to see some more kind of exploration of the anatomy of the creature, or at least get some silhouettes going. So it might be as simple as kind of just showing us some more of that ghoulish sky area. So giving us some relief in this side, just like that, and then maybe a kind of like a tail that's swirling around, starting from there. The thing is, a scene like this is best when it pans, so you know that you're going to need an active camera to kind of pan over the belly as the object walks over you like Godzilla. But something like this, just starting by separating the planes, there's a really good start. Let me see what your work looked like. So where is it? No, there we go. Okay, so where is your work? Okay, so good thing there weren't that many submissions that I can find them. So I'm not seeing any work actually. I'm not seeing any work done for this. Let me make sure that that's true. So not many gestures. I think this was just your draft, and then you put the character on top. So that's bad, and that explains a lot. It explains why you don't really have a solid distinction between the middle ground and the foreground. You don't really have a grayscale equivalent of this, Katarina. So next time what I would recommend is design the beast just without any camera angles. Then apply the beast on a really high dynamic camera angle, very active. And you can get those by watching TV, pausing your favorite action scene, and then just copying it down on a piece of paper and then going into your Photoshop and try to recreate that in a thumbnail. Thumbnails are important because they are a way to make the mistake before you have a dedicated amount of time set into it, because as soon as you dedicate hours into a painting, you get to that point of no return where it becomes your child and you can't let go of it. A thumbnail is supposed to be really distant, really topical. Touch it with a 10-foot pole. Don't really get in there. and try to make mistakes, get them out of the way, explore different angles. There's really no major amazing scene in any movie that has been shot without any kind of practice beforehand. Practice is what a thumbnail is. And for you to put on stage the first time you try to twirl a baton, you're just going to make a fool out of yourself because you don't really know how to do that and you don't have any practice behind you. So this is the point here, is that there was no separation between middle ground and foreground. There was no depth practice beforehand. It's hard to tell where the creature is. You can barely tell what it is. It has a little claws, but it could be anything else. It could be a creature on the ceiling, not really the belly of the creature walking towards. And no real references were used either. But good effort, good job. I like to see that students are trying something they've never done before, but it's really good to, you know, help yourself not make as many mistakes as possible, because we are a community and we communicate to each other. The basics of starting out at painting, you really shouldn't be painting like you're the only artist in the world. You should be painting with a bit more guidance, because you see other people doing it, and I'm sure you've seen other submissions. So I wouldn't blame you if you weren't part of a community, but you are. So I blame you for not having thumbnails or practice or just some sketches to practice a gesture. It's not always the first time around. It's not an artist that expects a hit for the first time they draw is ridiculous, is a ridiculous artist. You can't expect a hit every time. This framing is some of the most high energy stuff I've seen in this entire set today. I love this framing. It's so big it doesn't fit in the camera. It looks like the big Hydra in Clash of the Titans. Let me find that for you guys. Is it the Kraken? It's called the Kraken, not the Hydra. So this is that Kraken that comes out. Look at that low angle, makes it feel really big. Kind of doesn't even fit in the camera. You got Perseus and his little horse kind of feel very, very small. The scale is amazing, and it's just a really, really beautiful scene, especially the way it starts to solidify when he throws Medusa's head on him. I'm going to try to find it on YouTube. I think I'll get in trouble if I play the video. Never mind. But very, very big, very outside of the camera, the framing. Remember that these are moving frames, so sometimes in cinema you don't always have the best frames. Establishing shots are really usually level. The horizon line for an establishing shot is usually, just because it's self-explanatory, it's just establishing the environment they're in. So in Game of Thrones, before we see a scene in King's Landing, we see the city of King's Landing, and then we see King's Landing interior. So then we see the castle interior. Sometimes we see an even smaller version of that establishing shot of a courtyard, and then the people in the courtyard have a conversation. So establishing shots in cinema are very boring. They're meant to just be basic stuff, just letting the audience know, hey, now we've moved over into King's Landing and now we're looking at something happening here. But moving shots, crazy stuff like this, you don't need to establish anything anymore. But when it comes to a high energy action scene establishing shot, usually the director tries to establish it in a way that prepares the audience to be afraid. So stuff like this, the camera's always low, the character feels small, and the creature is larger than life. And so this would have been an establishing shot, and I love what you've done here. When it comes to your balance of your middle ground, foreground, background, I think you overdid it a little bit. You kind of got too excited with your dodge tool there. I would recommend you just darken everything and lighten only where you really need to. This is a great color to darken with. Let me see. All right, this is a great color to darken with here. You can change the color if you want to. I really like the ghoulish green. And I'm just going to start with what is the most, so I'm going to get a soft brush. And I'm going to start with what is the most kind of like reflective. So if there is a fire nearby or something, if there is a flame. Yeah, the leg hairs are great, but you have to make sure that you're still inside the focal point. The focal point for an environment should typically follow the kind of like the fourths divided again into fourths divided again. That's really, really, you know, it feels a little bit busy over here, and I don't even know where the the character is. I really had to look for them because they were as small as the rocks nearby. Now, I don't know about these rocks. I don't know if they're the chosen ones, but I don't know why they're set up as more important than the guy with the sword. So I would completely get rid of the guy with the sword and redraw him to be a little bit closer to the foreground, looking up. I need like a template with, maybe I can just draw it, with sword looking up. Images. Maybe I can find one. Maybe I just will not. Maybe I have to draw it. Alright, I'll just have to draw it. So I would get rid of this fella here. Alright, so let me actually start off by setting up a little bit more brightness down there somewhere. I'd merge that down. And I draw the character somewhere like you know, a little bit like a lunge, or this is going to take a while. So how do I want them to stand? So sword here, other hand here, haunched forward. Alright, maybe it's a samurai, I don't know. And then we have one leg like that, another like that, looking up. So the way to do it, looking up to show a little bit more of the ear line. And then we've got a cape, got a shoulder pad, got a ponytail caught in the wind, and the camera angle is low because the shoulders are in front of the head, so I'm really getting those C shapes, the stacking in. And maybe he's got a shield, and I don't know, some boots. Maybe the sword is pointing this way instead. Really doesn't matter. Maybe he's brandishing it in that really, really stupid, lame way that cinema likes. Hollywood stupid sword brandishing shit, like as if they actually did that back then. If they did, it would look cooler than that. So you'd have this character. I'm just going to exaggerate the perspective even more. I'm going to make it a little bit more dynamic. And filter, liquefy. I'm going to push that C shape out even further. Get that perspective going. Shrinking the head. Okay, so then now we have the character as part of this linear, like line of sight relationship between the two. And then if you want to go back, you have a little bit more of a chance to mess around with the glow. So the eye, one eye could glow a little bit more than the other. You really don't need all of them to glow. The inside of the mouth should be a little bit more strong. And then you should have a little bit more of a distinction between the planes of the land behind. So if this foreground here is this dark, then a fraction lower should be what's behind. A little bit lower than that. Just like that. And you have just a bit more land moving around anywhere. I really wouldn't do it like that. I like what you did here. Whatever you did here seems really, really cool. These kind of like, it's like a, you know, like a graveyard for like big animals. Or just like other insects, or maybe where they were all spawned. This seems really, really cool. The leg here was wonderful, but detail is a little bit too high. So control your contrast a little bit more depth goes a long way to help kind of set up the scene. But where you were before, it was just drowning in light. And it was hard to tell where everything was. Darkening everything, as you guys have seen already from like a number of my critiques, is just a way to reveal the light. So dimming the light gives light some character. So write that back to me, please. Okay, so I don't know if I'm going to be turning this one into a contest where the community will vote, but I do want to reward you guys the brush bundle for really good note takers. So if you are taking notes for this challenge, post them on the notes category, class notes category in the community to get your set of brushes. If they're very good notes, I will send you a message to message me on Facebook to get your link. Okay, so just right off the bat, it's a really, really bad angle. He kind of feels like he's having more of a conversation with a gentle beast than fighting him, but the gesture is just phenomenal. I love the gesture. I love everything about it. It's so high energy. It's so angry. I can't tell if this is his front, like his face, or if this is his back. I can't tell what we're looking at. I don't know if his face is here. If his face is forward, like if this is his face here, and he's just like, ugh, and then like that would look really cool because he's just like flinging his body forward. But if this was his backside, you should have had a bit more of a kind of like a representation of stacking there, and be a little bit more precise with where the knee is. That would have helped us, figure out which direction he's facing. Maybe give some detail along the back. Maybe show us where his sword, maybe the hilt is. That might help. The hilt or the sheath, or what is it called? Scabbard? I don't know. Maybe just some detail along the holder of the sword, and that would have helped us kind of see where that is. But if he was flinging himself forward, that would have been really cool. Scabbard. Okay, there we go. So again, a really off angle, and the environment really doesn't seem very dangerous. Even this low angle, like some of the high energy scenes that I had in my references was the battle scene from 300. So 300 battle scene. I'm just going to try to find images for it. So you see how framed the camera is, but it's not completely framed. It was slowed down, sped up, and the angle of the horizon is very, very steep. So it doesn't feel like steep, not very, very, but it does feel high energy, and eventually you zoom in, you zoom back out, you zoom in, you zoom back out. It does feel like a tapestry. But it's not, it's a very interactive tapestry. So you can get away with stuff like this if you had a bit more of color control, if you had a bit more energy. I mean, you do have that kind of slant here, which is cool. If you were zoomed out a little bit more, so you could see the whole body of the creatures, the object, the knight jumping forward and getting caught in midair in a really distant, kind of like a zoomed out photograph of the clash, right before the clash, like a poster, and the creature was there, larger than life, barely fitting into the frame. That would have really helped. The color, because see how almost monochromatic it feels. This is almost what I'm seeing. It's reminding me of this kind of high energy gesture, but everything else seems a bit still. And then you've got another high energy gesture for the monster. This monster feels more like a museum standing Tyrannosaurus Rex. It feels very static, doesn't feel very active. Look at his tiny little hands. I just think he's cute. I don't really think he's dangerous. The way to make him dangerous or make anything look dangerous is the typical gesture animals have before they attack. So they have a very, very haunched forward body, and the head is usually lower. This is just based off my cat, what she does when I don't give her snacks. Alright, so it's a very, very low body. They try to make themselves bigger. They kind of look like they're about to fight. The hands are kind of really close. The tail is low. So you could have done something a little bit more like that. Maybe the beast is kind of just walking around, kind of just trying to size him up. And that would have been really cool, a little bit more active. Maybe it could have been even more interactive, a gesture. So you could have been, one part of his body being so long could have been creeping, while the other body could have been just ready to, with a low head, snake-like, ready to pounce forward, looking directly at the knight or whoever's about to attack it. Right, so a good reference for there. That would have been something that I would have loved to see in your thumbnails. Okay, so then that's a really, really good gesture to start off with. And you don't have to worry about zooming out enough anymore, or even showing more of him. You could have shrunk him a little bit more, a little bit of a ray of light to help frame it like we have here. See these rays of light? Everybody uses them. Use them subtle. Don't overdo it, but this is used everywhere. These are all really, really basic framing principles. Foreground against background, establishing depth and scale. You got these people here in the background, very, very distant. Atmospheric fade. There's no atmospheric fade, it's just dust. But it behaves to really open the scene up and throw people into the distance. Even though it was a closed green screen set, they still managed to make it feel like it was an actual full desert landscape they found and filmed in. Okay, so a lot of the stuff that keeps an action scene, if you were to choose a still shot for it, is stuff that's just caught in motion. So any low density fabrics or hair or anything like that caught. So stuff that you could have attached to the character to attach a gesture of motion to reveal that, you know, he's in an open gesture jumping forward. That would have also added some movement. I'm not sure what just happened with Photoshop. No. Okay. All right. This one I really, really like. I like how the angle is facing us. I like how the object is in the distance and kind of looming over. I really like the sorceress and how she's actually part of it. The sorceress could have been more part of a perspective as well, but it's not necessary. One thing that's really bothering me is that the character is in a silhouette, but he's not dark enough. The shield is just one big blob. You could have done a lot more with the shield. You could have given it a bit more of a, you know, a real, like you had a chance to show off what you were, you know, the silhouette is a chance to show off some shape. Sorry, I kind of just zoned out when I started lassoing. And you kind of didn't use that. You just left it a basic blob of a shield. You had a chance for some detail to show some relief behind the character as well. You didn't. So it's taking up a lot of the space in the canvas. And you know, that's a lot of space for one object to take for it to be in it, and it just stays so boring a shape. So for those who didn't finish, you guys have had a long time to do this, and I'm not sorry. So I'm not really sure how shields work. I'm just gonna draw like what I think a shield is. I probably would have shortened this lower part, added some more like you know, details, maybe just something like that. Some more shield-like details. If you were going for that blocky shield, something like that, then you could have added some, you know, some detail on the inside. Maybe the shield is all cracked up, maybe it's all broken up to pieces. Maybe it's being destroyed as as we speak. That would have all helped add some detail to the painting. The character's silhouette is a little bit exaggerated. Kind of feels a little bit like cartoony, but cartoony is good if you had a cartoony face, but it felt like you were going for something a little bit more realistic. Great job on the skin. It really feels like, you know, like it just feels very, very reflective. Feels like the perfect kind of environment reflection on the skin, the sweat, the heat. It feels very, very hot. Not because he's not wearing a shirt, but I guess it's very hot. Then you have the eyes, which are way too large. Shrink those eyes a little bit. Okay. And really what he'd be looking at is just his shield. He wouldn't be looking at, you know, some sort of distance. He'd be looking directly at his shield. Just to see that if his shield is falling apart or not. I would give more of a grim face and maybe actually some of that and some more anger, some more anguish, kind of what a guy does when he's lifting. For the gesture of the body, the legs feel like they're made out of noodles, or feels like they're what is it called? Like a rag doll. Feels like a rag doll. Doesn't feel very stable. Again, you're missing a lot of rigidity, and this is all stuff that you could have handled with a gesture, with a simple sketch. Just, you know, sometimes the leg armor is a little bit more geometric than noodly, so that could have been a start. The feet kind of don't have that much detail, but that's not really important. I think you did wonderfully with this part of the painting. I feel like he should be a lot darker. 45, let me see. Oh God, come on. Okay. Okay, so I'm just trying to capture a good lasso here to show you that we need a bit more of a silhouette in this area. Not so much the sword. The sword could have been like a little beam interrupting the fire. Okay, so select inverse. Deselect all of that. And just darken him just a little bit more, considering that you have that much kind of fire going on. So it's just a bit bright, just a bit washed out, and you can bring back some of that saturation you lost if you feel like you need a little bit more. The brightness, there is enough light in that area to reveal that. And then we have the blue, kind of the little notes of blue here, applied as a color layer towards the interior of the body. And this is just the one half of the painting that has all the detail on it, so that's why I'd focus on it a little bit more. But you do have to look back over here. The night sky wouldn't stay so dark, considering that in front of the camera there's all this light going on. The camera doesn't have the technology, and that's what we're basing it off. What we see with what cameras do is what we do, and what our eyes do is typically what cameras do. So there would be a lot of brightness here, just the glow of all of this energy here, kind of illuminating the background. And then there would be all the extra bounce light coming back, and so that's why I darkened him, because we can go back and lighten anywhere where we feel like we're missing some detail. And that could be all of the brightness coming back from the fire circling in front of him. So you have this really, really great line of vision moving back towards the creature. The creature is up against this moon, but you ended it off on the side. You could have used the moonlight to kind of reveal more of the monster, a little bit more along the wings as well. That would have really helped you. And you don't have to show so much of the rocks. That the sorceress in the back could have been more of a darker color, but she's okay where she is. I would put her somewhere like over here, just under the monster, so it's not, so we have this nice empty area. But I love what you did. I love how the camera's low. I love how the character feels high energy. I love that you included all the stuff in the painting. You really, really have a lot of, what's the term? I never know the gusto. Really great work, Daniel. I'm really proud of your work right now. Maybe enlarging him might help the scene a little bit, because he feels a little small. Being close to the camera doesn't hurt. Don't be afraid to bring the character closer to the camera. Sometimes an over-the-shoulder shot, it's a valid shot, and sometimes that's all we really need to kind of get the audience involved. So don't be scared of an over-shoulder shot. It doesn't even have to be that close. It's just sometimes, you know, a little bit closer does a lot more for the painting. The angles and all of the lights on the creature could be a little bit more, you can have a little bit more contrast there. Definitely. And you can make this green flame that I added, you can add a texture to it. So it doesn't have to be just a glowing soft light. It can be, you know, just a full-on, that billowing edge of the heat that you see on a sidewalk or something in the summer day. that could be what you're using here. This is really good as an establishing shot. I love what you did with the character looking over there. I just wish she was a little bit bigger. The swarm is non-existent. A lot of you guys are forgetting about the swarm, so just crazy, you know, little smaller creatures flying everywhere like locusts. That would have helped make the painting feel a little bit busy, but all I can hear is just the slight air of wind. I don't really hear monstrosity in the distance. I don't hear the crazy like thunderclaps of wings in the distance. All I hear is just that it feels very empty, because you've got some beautiful, beautiful depth here, and you've really opened the room up a little bit too much. I recommend filling it up with a little bit of a swarm. So I don't have a brush for that, actually. I used to have a wonderful brush for it. But a little bit of that, but the darker colors, obviously. So it's just some swarm here and there. Some in the foreground, some smaller. Just following kind of like paths. That would have helped fill the room up a little bit, make it a little bit more dirty. And applying a lot of fog and a lot of smog, just a little bit everywhere, with the sun barely coming through. So that would have created that whole environment that we really want to see. So applying that there. Feels less like a beautiful, serene air temple landscape when we kind of fill the skies up and darken them a little bit. Okay, and you can lighten them up if you want to. You can throw in a big haze like that from the sun. You can lighten it up if you want. That's a bit too much. That would have really helped kind of to create a distinction between the foreground and the background of the character. But it's not active, it's not near the camera, the creature hasn't seen the monster, and it doesn't really feel like a boss fight, but it's acceptable in the sense that it could be a poster, it could be a loading screen. It does pass as some of the more you know, acceptable versions of this challenge. So I do actually see this being used as a loading screen. The water really wouldn't get that dark with the object above it. The cast shadow, because the sun is there, is more directed this way. So you can keep that there and then fake reflect some light, so just get some fake glare back from the light in there, and that will help kind of create a texture difference across the painting. Make it look beautiful even though it's not really meant to be like a glamour shot environment. This is looking great. The camera's nearby, but I'm not sure why you interpreted the sword's light as a line, as a rim light. Your depth is non-existent. So if it's a nighttime scene and the dragon's behind him, and the sorceress is there, then there is very, very little that you can use to establish depth with. So something has to be here between us and the object so that they're not sharing the same contrast level. The object is not, the object number one, or the main object, or the point of interest, is not discernible between the background and the foreground. That's why you felt like you had to add the rim light, which you probably felt like worked at the time. It wouldn't be rim light. I understand what you're doing, it's the reflection of the sword, but it wouldn't be rim light. It would be like a complete sculpting, and then you'd have the Terminator line right beside it. Oh shit, I need a new layer. Okay, so, and it would be a bit more like that, like you're actually sculpting the body. That would make a little bit more sense, but that's not what's going to save the painting. What's going to save the painting is if you change the time of day, you bring in a bit more of that fog and that swarm, you enlarge the creature, you lower him and shrink him just a little bit along the camera, maybe push him along this way, and enlarge this whole system here. So you would have cliff, the large creature kind of circling the cliff, protecting its mother, the crazy lady, and then the kind of whatever you've got going on over here. Okay, so that cliff here would have been a bit better. You kind of push them off to the uninteresting part of the canvas, and it's nighttime, so you lost depth and you lost a focal point. I know it's easy to count, okay, depth and focal point were both lost, but when those two words and lost, it follows them, happens, that should be a big red flag for you. So let me see what you were doing with your planning. Okay, so maybe you didn't plan. It would explain a lot, but let me see. Okay, so no, well, you had a progress image. You didn't really have multiple. Did you have multiple thumbnails? There we go. So this looks a lot like what I just drew for you. It's in front of the camera. The object's larger. It just should be flipped. I really like this, not so much because the gesture is moving forward, but just because everything is framed better. I would have liked this one better. I'm not sure of these three which ones you chose. I think you started a new one. You just started a new one. Don't do that. You do thumbnails because you have to choose one of them. So which of these did you choose in the end? You probably mixed these two together. Just got the foreground guy of this one and the background of that one. But these are just really, really similar. We should see more variety in camera angle as well. So that over the shoulder should have been a little bit more explored. Okay, so for this one, I love the gesture. The time of day is drowning in light. It's a desert scene, but the character has complete darkness on one side, which makes zero sense. So if you had just lightened the character a little bit, oops, on like a lighten layer, just like that, like just lightening the character. Leave that as dark as you want, but just this alone would have helped kind of complete the scene. Foreground has more contrast, so that's a little too much contrast. So it kind of feels like a glaring heat of the sun. You can make the guys in the foreground a little bit darker, so you have some depth, and I would just start there. I'll start off with the depth. I think the camera angle is good because this is another 300 example of like the 300 style framing that tapestry, but like an active tapestry. So this is really hard to erase because I'm trying not to overdo it. So I used lighten layer and I just used the environment color. So what is an environment color? The environment color is the most average color you see everywhere. Sometimes that's grass. Grass sometimes can be an average environment color. What other environment colors can you think of that might choose the color of an environment? Can you guys think of any other average colors in an environment that there's an abundance of that texture or object that might change the or determine the color of the environment? Okay, so I'm just darkening these foregrounds here. Nice sense of scale, yeah, definitely. Beautiful work, but it just really didn't make sense. I don't know what you were doing with your shadow, why you had so little. Sky ambience, excellent, the sky. It looks like it's coming out of some sort of crevice. It just looks like it's just, you know, Godzillaing around a desert scene. I do want to see that there's a swarm. I do want to see more of the story intact. You can't completely change the story, but I love how the character is dressed for the occasion. I love how they look like they're Middle Eastern, or they're dressed like a Spartan. I really like that. Time of day, light source. The room's walls, excellent. Beautiful answer, Dora. The room's walls, the room's color can also change the environment. Air, water, bounce light, sky. How about grass and foliage? So if there's a lot of grass and foliage in the area, then it will definitely help enhance will help you determine what the color is and enhance the environment. So it's easy to know what's determining the color or the color wash in a photograph, but what happens when you have to start from the ground up? Well, you ask yourself, what is the most abundant environment color in this area? Where is the environment? Where is it? And what time of day is it? And that's kind of how you determine where you're going to go with a color wash. But before it was too dark, it felt more like a nighttime scene with those Tron-like glows. You needed to really get more depth in there, so I darkened the foremost one as dark as possible without kind of throwing off the wash and the haze of the desert and the desert heat. And I kept the distance a little bit as bright as Lighten Layer had it. And I used the color of the sand, which is the environment color. Beautiful job, beautiful job. This is, you don't always have to have the camera low if the object can be bigger than too big for the frame and the character has a high energy gesture. This is why I asked you guys to have thumbnails where you're experimenting with the gesture a bit. The gesture is the only thing that can carry you, and in those 300 scenes just now, you saw that there was a really, really high energy action, lunging, moving forward, kicking. Those are really open gestures, high energy open gestures that'll help move the painting along. This one is really great. I feel like I'm not really looking at I like how you didn't forget the swarm. It feels very cartoony, which is cute. I don't like how the environment behind her is almost the same contrast as she is. We've kind of lost her. These two can have the same contrast, but that's because they're sharing the same space at a certain degree. But this stuff in the distance, it shouldn't really do that. We're seeing a very awkward negative space in the navigator read. This is something that you should have picked up in your thumbnails. That definitely should have been just, should have been screaming at you. So you need to lighten all this ground space here. Add some more environment. It can't just have a big empty space like that and frame it with dark edges like this. The cliff is, yes, it was described as the plateau on which the object was found, but you don't have to exaggerate the cliff so much that it's an actual fissure and they're fighting on top of a cliff, like an actual cliff trench. So lighten that area nearby. I like how the creature again is too big for the screen. I hate the framing. The framing is just horrid. I'm sorry I have to use these terms. Never frame with a tile canvas or something near to it. Something like this, something cinematic is wonderful. By the way, please, the reason why you have this little white thing here, please do not just enable download images for Google Plus. Because I won't be able to download your stuff for critique. I have to take awkward screenshots that suck. I'm not even sure if that's how you initially framed it. This could have just been the screenshot that I took and Google couldn't download the full image. But something like this is a little bit better. Shrinking him would have made him a lot more weak feeling. And so shrinking his size a little bit would have helped. That's not helping. Okay, so shrinking his size against the creature over here and raising him to be eye level with her. Ossie, please, it's not cuddle time. Please, sweetheart, just stay. Stay. Ow, fuck. Ossie! Stop it! Stupid Godzilla! Okay. So I shrunk his size because we shrunk the canvas, so he should be taking up a little bit less. I'm sorry, sweetie. You know you're not allowed to do this while I'm teaching. The color is a little bit monochromatic. I like the ant, but the large eye makes him look too cute. I would recommend, I love the scales he did, just hidden detail here. She's angry at me. Just in shrinking the eyes, making him look a little bit more scary. So if you guys have ever seen like a scorpion's face or something like that, those are very, very ugly. Combine it with a lizard, and then you get a little bit more time to, a little bit more of a reference, to reference I'm sorry, my brain's just completely gone. Ossie just completely distracted me. To make it look a little bit less relatable for the audience, make it look a little less cute. The gesture here, the framing, it could be improved because where there's so much detail and magic, you got a cool sword, you got some magic spells. I'd love if those were right in front of the camera so we could see them. The character isn't wearing much, isn't doing much. If they did have a great gesture, you hit it with the skirt. So there's not much going on outside of this really cool kind of like cluster in a corner of the creature. I really like what you did with the creature. And here the sizing and scale feels a little bit awkward, and the upper body feels a lot larger than the lower body. This is wonderful. It's reminding me exactly of that Kraken scene. You need just a little bit more thought on the light flooding in and creating this depth here. So the background should have been lighter than the creature, and I'll show you how beneficial that is. So I'm just gonna throw that in, and nope, I'm not gonna do that. That would be a mistake. Okay. This is getting confusing. Doesn't matter. So a little bit there would have helped kind of separate the object from the background. Just like that. And you see how he feels like he's more part of the foreground. And then wherever the object gets closer and closer, that's where we delete. So I'm going to get the old layer. I'm covered in OC hair. And I'm just getting that edge back for the body against the background. Okay, so you see how now we have that nice distinction, whereas before we didn't really have that, and I messed it up before. And then we can take that same light flooding somewhere back here, and then just get our edges back, so that we have more of that fog moving upward, the same kind of miasma kind of moving up. Okay, remember that fog is a great way to fill in the spaces. So when you feel like, hey, there's just this awkward, you know, the foreground ends and the background begins and it just feels really awkward, fog is a wonderful way to unite the scene. So write that back. And it doesn't have to be with a lot, it can be just in layers, but when we have, it's something that we don't really see, fog, we don't really notice it, but as artists we have to notice everything. So I'm just throwing a little bit of that fog in here. You have this really awkward space here that's just, there's nothing going on, so I'm just gonna add some rocks just so we can fill that little space up. I'm not going to detail it, but just as a placeholder. And then you have this, you know, this detail, this focal point right here, which is fitting perfectly as a, you know, the kind of dividing the what is it called? The golden ratio. So what we want to do is just bring in some scales, bring in some kind of texture, because here you're allowed to get a little bit weird and under textured. But over here it gets, you're using the same width brush as you are out here at one point. So this big brush right here is making it look very awkward for the scene, because it's not really reading as a focal point. So the scene is right now without a focal point, even though we know there's a focal point and it's very visible. We're kind of just missing one because the brush you used wasn't small enough for the area. Okay, so I just kind of got rid of that weird color problem because of the bad selection. The character is impossible to see, so I wouldn't put him there. I would really put him somewhere here. So let me select him. Bear with me. And then flip horizontal and put him there. Just see how much more, just feels like he really fits into the scene. Even just smack dab in the middle is fine. And if you make the creature tilt its head, it'll feel like he's looking at him. Actually, I am going to flip horizontally. Just something like that might help. But now the light is completely off, so give me a minute. And this is just fine for the scene. Now we just bring that light in as required. So now we have more of a complete, you know, it's just a complete spiral of line of vision here. We're not really captured into one kind of half of the painting. There was nothing really going on here. We brought the attention back towards this area. This guy was just non-existent. He wasn't really there. Nothing was really happening. He wasn't really involved. So we're not really missing him. But over here is where he really gets to be part of the story. Okay, so you still have the same, you know, picture, the same attitude for the monster. It's just we made him look in a different direction. Alright, so we're just can put some more jagged rocks to make the environment look a little bit more dangerous. All these rocks could help the line of vision, kind of pointing at, hey, everybody look over here because this is where the action is. And they could be a little bit darker to show, you know, some depth changes. Okay. So I don't think I'll be able to make the same changes all around. See how everything was centered towards one part of the canvas and now everything is turned back. Yeah, when your piece isn't reading well zoomed out, it's, you know it's not gonna, you zooming in isn't gonna really help. Even if, especially if you zooming in doesn't mean more detail, because it's not detail at this point. When we zoom in, we want to see those ugly little mini eyes. I would suggest adding more eyes. It's a very dragon-like creature, kind of like an insect. So you can combine some themes between like scales, which isn't very insect-like, but insect-like eyes, just moving across. Yeah. So that's one down. That's done too. This one is really great, but if the camera was behind her, it would really feel, even if the camera was just a little bit lower, it doesn't even have to be behind her. So the camera could have been like just a little lower. She could have been there crawling away. And she's just like, holy shit, where's my sword? The sword is over here. She's reaching for it, and there's the monster kind of crawling towards her, just like that, larger than the image. Check, check. The camera doesn't even have to be lower. It can be just as leveled as she is and would still be scared. See, one arm is lower because it's getting closer. One arm is distant, like a dragon crawling over, and then you could give it its nasty centipede-like body. And then the other creatures are also coming closer to her. And it could have like one really, really big jelly-like belly at the back that looks like that's where the kind of maggots come from, or the larva. And she's kind of just reaching for her sword, but she's still looking forward. Okay, so that could have been a little bit more interactive than this. I'm not sure what this big square is here. I don't know if this is a texture you forgot to blend out or something. There's a big outline over here. Great piece, another tapestry type piece. It doesn't feel very active. I want it to feel more like it's not just sitting there waiting. It looks like it's waiting. I don't know what it is about the creature, but it looks like it's waiting. It doesn't really feel like it's about to pounce or something like that. So one way to make it pounce is to make its little tentacles kind of like interacting with the nearby environment, make it look like it's actually in motion. So that's one way to make it pounce. Another way is to, using the rules of depth, bringing down all of these units down in level, and making the foreground most kind of like a pincer or whatever it's called, more sharp. Then that way it looks like it's a little bit more active. Then some of the teeth could be kind of opening up a little bit, and some could be closing. So it's kind of like doing, it's like a I don't know what to call it. It's like some are open and some are closed, and then, you know, just feels like it's chomping its teeth and ready to kind of eat or something. I don't know what to call it when something like, we do it with our fingers, when one finger is low and then the other goes, I don't know. It's just like a cycling of the teeth. Just make the teeth look like they're cycling. That doesn't make any sense either, Istebrak. Another thing that you could do is show like any kind of surface disturbance after he jumped up. That's always great. You have some nice cloth here that you could darken a little bit so it's visible. What else could you show? Some drowning lights here in the distance. Just some daytime to help out with the really, really super low contrast going on. So some of the most famous artists who draw stuff like this, and I always call them tapestry pieces, is that they have like this really inactive activity, and everything is really low contrast except where the painting really gets going, when there's the most detail going on. That's where they bring in the only amount of contrast. I'm not even talking on like fundamental basics. The only contrast they have is just around the active points. So anywhere where you have active points here and here could really enhance the painting just a little bit. It doesn't have to be a halo. It could be just the sword kind of just glowing. Okay, you also need some framing to complete the painting. The framing is a little bit weak. You need to darken that upper half. Nothing's really happening over there. He feels like he's cornered and he's just doing his last little fight backward. And some subsurface scattering wouldn't hurt, considering that it's tentacles and all that. So that might help you. Arch down. Oopsie. Subsurface just around here might do a lot for the creature. Just back here, and then saturate where we have subsurface going on. Okay, you can bring in some subsurface scattering for these pincer thingies, these legs. Getting brighter and brighter the closer they get to the background, but it has to be in areas where there is shadow, of course. And all of this brightness down here could be fog, like a substance kind of just moving upward. So instead darken, but only lightning only where there is that little green lava or juice where the nest was. So I would get and just brighten towards the bottom, creating like a pathway between all these rocks to show where the bed or the nesting area was for the beast. And that way you've connected these two grounds together. And I will just go back and again erase what's missing. So dodge tool didn't affect everything on the way. And then just to finish off, I'll brighten these guys up just to make them look like they're more in the distance. Actually, what am I doing? This one is more in the distance. This one is second. And then like a undulation. Perfect. Thank you. Undulation. Perfect term. Yes, make it look like it's undulating. So yeah, I'm just darkening this little pincer thing. Do you have a name for this thing? The shape is all wrong, so I'm just going to correct that really quickly. It's taking up a lot of the space in the canvas, so I have to make sure the shape is nice and streamlined. Actually, it looks like an arrowhead or a spear directed towards the the dude. Okay, you can add something intriguing here, maybe some venom. You can toss some other stuff around, but where you were before, things were reading a little bit underactive, a little bit boring. Nothing was really happening. The creature wasn't doing anything. So imagine if the creature was open a little bit more. Its mouth is open. Some more teeth visible on the inside. So the slightest little bit of effort really will make the teeth read. Don't overdo it or over-represent the teeth, because it'll just look like you've lost your focal point. So I'm just drawing really, really light touch. Some more teeth on the inside. And my brush is fading the closer I get to the interior. And it'll just look like there's some more teeth in there. But it just doesn't really do much unless it's open, like the Kraken from that same movie I referenced earlier. It doesn't really do much until it's open. I want to add some brightness on the knuckles, because the knuckles feel like they're stretched, catching some light. I do want to saturate right after that because it's not subsurface. Oops. It's just flesh. Subsurface is only just here around the outer rim. Okay. Merge down. Almost done. Sorry if I don't get to everyone today. I think I have gotten to everyone. This is really good. I like the framing. It's too much of a long distance, like an establishing shot. It doesn't feel like this character is close enough. I mean, like, she'll have to run for another 2 minutes to get near him. Not even 2 minutes, like just like a good 30-minute hike. I want her to feel like she's he's seen her already and they are ready to fight. It's a boss fight, so there has to be an interaction. It feels like a clear sky. It feels like that moment when the dragon from Harry Potter finally gets into the sky and starts to fly. Remember that scene when they release him? Spoiler alert. It doesn't feel like it's the characters know yet that she's part of this illustration, that she's part of this entire setup, which is not good, because it's more of an establishing shot for character design for the monster. She doesn't feel like she's a part of the painting. Feels like a different painting altogether. Framing like this is cheesy. It's not tapestry. It's book cover, 90s book cover kind of style. But because the character is so safe, it's so posy, it's so stiff. That's what the book covers were a long time ago for some young adult fantasy novels. They were very, very just safe. The characters are always beautified. And so I want to see a bit more anguish, a bit more of a high energy kind of fight. Things are less glamorous, less pin-up. Feels very pin-up with her pose and disconnected completely between foreground and background. Nothing's really connecting them. It doesn't feel like there's anything she could step on that'll get her closer to the monster. So if there was a bit more of a step system here, then that would explain how she can get close to him. If he was a little bit more larger than life, if it looks like at least there's a gesture that he sees her, if it looks like she's seen her, if he's a bit bigger, that's how you could salvage the painting, because I know you worked hard on this foreground area. And the fire seems a bit dim. If you want to show that there's energy, you have to brighten up into no man's land value, so whites. And this one, another example of that kind of 300 clash scene. But I like how he's larger than life. I like the ray of light you use. So check, check, check. Great gesture. The gesture feels a bit safe. I would love if the hand was kind of just trailing behind. The hand hasn't really flung forward yet, because in order to make the blow happen, he'd have to fling the hand forward right before he's reaching the face. So I would let the hand flow behind a little bit to kind of create that nice X shape, or half the X. Kind of felt like you stiffened up the body by bending the arm. I'd love if there was another kind of arm of the monster here in the foreground. That would have been really cool to make the character look like he's about to get eaten alive. If there was more of a forward hunch of the spine, so dragging this, and putting it here to make him look like he's, you know, ready to kill him. That's 2 now. I didn't mean to do that, but that looks pretty good. And just shrinking his size. That would have been nice. So flatten image. So shrinking him, making him look a lot smaller. It's okay if you lost the detail. It's not about the character. It's about the relationship between the character and the monster. And if the relationship requires a massive scale change, then that's what's going to happen. Alright, smudge tool, you can relax now. And maybe I made him a bit too small. I'll see in a second. So you'll see how doing that with the arm will actually just add like an extra movement line. Let me zoom out to test if that's the right position. Yeah, that looks great. Other stuff you can do is color balance. A lot of you guys aren't color balancing properly. You guys need to balance your colors a little bit more. Decide on the environment. What's the most prevalent environment color? What is the time of day? Where is the light source coming from? All of that will help you choose better colors. So this little beam of light that's allowing us to see him is one consistent beam of light that makes it look like we're not really in a cave. But if you thin it out toward the top just a little bit, it'll make it look like it's actually coming from a small little window in a cave, and that's kind of making the time of day feel a little bit more accurate. So flatten image. Am I still on darken? Yes. Okay, and we're darkening the foreground a little bit, and that'll give us an opportunity to brighten up all of that bioluminescence on the creature. Just make him look a little bit more dangerous. All the goop and glob of his environment kind of glow upward, and this foreground piece that's really dark and large really helped us close off the scene. And all you need to do now is just show us some more detail, you know, some more eyes. I'm going to show some random shit. You know, just something to help wake up the object in that dark area. And I'm just going to throw a little like centralized kind of beam of light to show its anatomy. Blur it because it's in the shadows. And this is typically what your thumbnail should have been. Really, really rough stuff. Nothing too extravagant. Just really, what's hap-handed? What's the term, Tom? It's just like a, you know, quick hand kind of setting up of some of the values and textures. Quick lasso stuff, nothing too serious. I'm going to throw in these little, I don't know what they are, grasshopper cricket things. Okay, so this is what I can do with what you guys have done. However, I do recommend that some of this stuff is redone completely, like restarted, or exploring something else. But you see how unoccupied the foreground was? And a simple little line like that, a simple little arm, occupied the foreground a little bit. Okay, so any questions at all on today's studies? Any question at all? This was really fun. We've never done anything like this before. So a quick vote. Do you guys want more boss fight type environment, active, high cinema kind of designs? Or do you guys want more character designs? So let's make a, so one for character designs, and 2 for environments. Let's see some votes. Tom equals dictionary. I don't know where Tom went. You're very, very welcome. This was very, very fun. I love seeing this type of stuff. 2, okay. 2, okay, more environments. Yes, 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 more environments. 2. Come on, guys. Just, you know, try to not make everything a joke. I really want to know what you guys want. More character design. A lot of 2s. A lot of 1s as well. Mostly 2s. Lots of 2s. 50-50. Okay. Mostly wants to snack. 2, 2. Why not just have both? Well, I can't have too many at the same time. I don't have a lot of time to put them together, so I want to know that what I do next is something that you guys really want to see. So more environment stuff. It's kind of turned into like a 60-40 environments for environments. So that's kind of decided it. All right then, this was really fun. Please remember to use your middle ground, foreground, background. Make sure that you've kind of capitalized on your ability to fill up the scene with these 3. It's not that difficult to assign a middle ground, foreground, background. As long as you remember there's a depth difference and scale change the further you get along an object. Use your camera angles. It helps keep the viewer a part of your image as a part of what's happening in the scene, on the field, not as a separate omnipotent force looking at a drawing in a flip book or a tapestry. Don't flatten everything out. Sometimes gesture, costume, and expression is not enough to make an image and a scene in a movie pop. Watch movies, you know, record the really best scenes that you like, the most active, beautiful scenes, even if it's just a, you know, basic establishing shot. If you really like those and you're into that kind of painting, the distant landscape types, go ahead and copy that down. You can shamelessly copy scenes from cinema because there's really only so many you can do. Over-the-shoulder shots, close-ups, long shots, establishing shots. It's just really worm's eye, bird's eye. It's just not, you can count them with 2 hands. And you can look them up. There's a lot of literature out there for those who are interested in bringing a bit more dynamic into the paintings. And honestly, you really should be doing that, whether or not you feel like cinema is something that you're interested in researching. There's so many beautiful documentaries that talk about what happens in cinema. One of them I've recommended on my page, Every Frame a Painting, which is directly related to what we're talking about today and what I talk about a lot in class. They're a channel on YouTube, Every Frame a Painting. I love how they dissect scenes from movies and talk about what makes them work and what doesn't, and how they relate to older movies, and how some things will always be reused, that we're always borrowing in cinema. When you have that background, you realize that it's less about the object and more about the framing. The object only needs some really, really basic structure to it to make it read. You can build a whole movie around some really, really simple shapes. For instance, in the game Journey, which you can watch completely and play through with no commentary on YouTube, which I recommend. The characters are such basic little creatures, but because of some beautiful atmospheric fade, they manage to pull some amazing reads in the environment. So Journey game. Just really, really simple atmospheric fade and beautiful light physics, and the character itself is so boring, very, very little detail, but somehow it's enchanting. This is one of my favorite scenes, and the music, everything about it is just colossal, and I love this game for its simplicity and how it's managed to maximize so much atmosphere with so little detail. So you need to get a bit more mature like this. Your thumbnails should look a lot like this, you guys. So keep all that in mind for the next time. And when you do add detail, it's such a celebration. It's such a beautiful, sight for sore eyes when you actually do end up adding detail. But it all starts with really, really beautiful, simple representation of space, unification of color, and use of the camera. That helps keep the viewer a part of your painting. If you forget the viewer, then you're forgetting, your audience, and then you wonder why you don't have a larger audience. You have to make sure to keep them involved, especially with landscapes, which are directly related to movies and sequential storytelling. You have to remember that there is someone who's going to be reading this and combining these frames together. So I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Good luck with everything. And if you guys want to continue your hair studies, please do. I'll take a look at them on Tuesday. And for those who didn't get a critique today, I might look at it, I might not. I was very, very serious about meeting the deadline today. Thank you everyone for uploading on the right time today and for submitting your work in progress. I really appreciate seeing those. It really helped me figure out what you guys were up to while you were painting, and you know, for those who weren't planning, I hope this is a big eye-opener. Make the mistakes before you have to go on stage and make them. I will see you guys on Tuesday the 15th. Bye everyone.